Entering the hospital room to visit her sick boss, the cleaner walked in without knocking. Hearing the conversation between two orderlies, Ashley felt ready to sink into the ground out of shame. The conversation happening between her and the HR worker was so unpleasant and humiliating that Rachel was probing her relentlessly, trying to sniff out something suspicious. Ashley had nothing to hide regarding her work skills, but she really didn't want to talk about the story of her emergency escape from her hometown. Otherwise, this aggressive tall brunette with heavily made-up brown eyes peering out from under her bangs would chew her up and spit her out. Behind Rachel hung a mirror. In it, Ashley hardly recognized herself. A confident, optimistic, rosy-cheeked, blonde young woman with a round face and sky-blue eyes on a bright summer day somehow lost her perfect posture and shriveled up like an old lady. The blush faded from her face. Her eyes seemed to have lost their brightness. It felt as if Rachel had drained all her energy during the half-hour conversation. "Why do you need to gloat over me? Will it make you feel better? Oh, you're such a nasty piece of work. But whatever, I really need this job, and I'm not going anywhere without it. Plus, your director is such a pleasant and kind man. He greeted me very politely, so if I'm lucky, I won't have to deal with you at all," Ashley thought, trying to convince herself to stay. "So, why did you decide that you're suitable for a job at our company? If I understand correctly, you don't even have an education." Rachel emphasized for the umpteenth time. "That's true. I already mentioned I worked as a poultry keeper, but the ad said that a person without an education could work as a secretary. The main thing is a pleasant appearance, articulate speech, and the ability to type quickly." "I can do all of that," Ashley countered. "Have you seen yourself in the mirror?" Rachel asked. "Of course. Especially since it's right behind you. What's wrong with me?" Ashley was a pretty and slim young woman. She could hardly be called ugly, so she couldn't understand where Rachel was going with this. But Rachel was practically choking on bile, continuing to press. "Can you imagine that some esteemed client comes to see Mr. Hanson and sees a frump like you at the reception? Look, you don't even have a decent manicure. Your shoes look like you just stomped out of your poultry house. And what's that on your head? It's incomprehensible to wear such a grandmother's hairstyle. And don't get me started on your dress. I haven't seen such bad taste in a long time. It feels like you forgot to get dressed and came in your house robe. Listen, Rachel, it's just clothing. When I get my paycheck, I'll update my wardrobe right away. I can change my hairstyle, even to one like yours. I could cut my bangs and let my hair down." Ashley was on the verge of tears. "You know, the secret to my perfect style isn't just the bangs. Every detail of my look is thought out, but it's pointless to explain this to a rural simpleton. You asked what's wrong with you. I'll tell you. Everything about you is wrong. Will that make it clearer for you? You should have stayed in your backwoods. That's where you belong." The woman banged her pen on the table so hard several times that the cap flew off. But it was written in the ad. Ashley was tired of resisting and gave in. Would she really not get a job this time either? How would she pay for her room then? Mrs. Hazel was certainly a good woman, but she wasn't just renting out part of her home for nothing. Her son, Thomas, is disabled and uses a wheelchair. They had already allowed Ashley to pay only part of the rent and were willing to wait until she found a job. But 3 weeks had passed, and no one was hiring. What's with you, always going on about what's written in the ad? It's written on fences too. Did you leave your village for something? I bet there's some dark story behind you, Rachel smirked. The woman clearly enjoyed having drained so much blood from the simpleton. Her cheeks even flushed with the pleasure of her own impunity. You know what? That's none of your business. That was too much. Ashley certainly wouldn't share how her fiancé had humiliated her in the village by leaving her right before the wedding. She stood up and was about to leave when she suddenly heard a warm, purring baritone. Rachel, I'm really surprised at you. Why are you being so rude to this lovely girl? I'm sure there's a place for her in our company. The broad-shouldered brunette poured water from the cooler and handed Ashley a plastic cup, casually brushing against her hand. She immediately recognized the boss, whom she had liked since catching a glimpse of him in the hallway. Ashley instantly perked up and felt uplifted. It seemed to her that she was Cinderella, and now the kind prince would rescue her from this wicked woman, helping her in some way. "Mr. Hansen, what am I supposed to do with this miracle? How am I supposed to hire her? It's absolutely impossible for her to be sitting in your reception." Rachel spread her arms, instantly becoming more polite. "It seems we recently had a cleaner quit. So, if it won't offend you," he pretended to feel very uncomfortable making such a suggestion. "No way, no job could offend me. I really need to earn some money right now." "How much do you pay?" Ashley asked. "Rachel will explain everything to you. If we work well together, then we can offer something more later," Mr. Hansen purred and walked away. Ashley, enchanted, watched his athletic figure retreat, the suit fitting him perfectly. She was a naive, romantic soul. For a moment, she even thought that the boss liked her a little bit. And who knows, maybe someday she could look as good as Rachel, or even better. Then anything would be possible. While waiting for her interview, two female managers giggled about the fact that the boss was single. "We pay little here," Rachel said dryly, cutting short Ashley's dreams. She explained that the first 3 months were like a probation period. She would have to work without formal employment and for half the amount. If everything went well, then she could apply for a full-time position and a salary according to the payroll. In reality, Rachel regularly helped the greedy boss pull off such tricks. Usually, after 3 months, they would be offered to continue working under the same conditions for another 3 months. Thus, a total of 6 months, the next fool would work for symbolic wages. And after that, if she was completely naive, she would continue to believe in a miracle for another 3 months. But no one lasted more than 3 quarters. People understood that they had no future there and left. The humiliating interview aimed to lower the already low self-esteem of the simpleton. Then, supposedly by coincidence, the gentle and charming director would come by, and rarely anyone could resist and not agree to the terms offered. Such tricks were played on managers, secretaries, and any employees who fell for it. Therefore, the staff at the trading company constantly changed, but serious money was saved. Besides Rachel, only about a dozen people were officially employed, while the remaining 50 workers were on what was referred to as a probationary period. "So, Rachel, did you agree?" Mr. Hansen asked when Ashley had left. "Of course. You showed up just in time. Like a prince on a white horse. That simpleton has probably already imagined that one day you'll marry her. That's how they portray it in movies," Rachel laughed. "I had faith in you, and there's no need to attribute your accomplishments to my charm," the boss said affectionately. He intentionally selected tough and abrasive individuals as permanent employees, the kind who would thrive on belittling others. People like Rachel weren't paid much either. But compared to the poor souls working for half the pay and with no guarantees, they felt quite successful. Howard Hansen prided himself on managing things so cleverly. He could spend a lot of time relaxing without worrying that people like Rachel wouldn't let the others get away with anything. Ashley stepped outside and decided to save the dwindling money, so she walked home. Things weren't so bad after all. Surely Mr. Hansen would be kind to her. She was confident that she would be hired quickly. Ashley believed she could handle the cleaning since she had never been lazy. "Do you need help?" She suddenly heard a male voice. "With what?" Ashley didn't understand. She had forgotten that she had bought a 5-liter bottle of sunflower oil at the supermarket near work. She had never seen it at such a low price anywhere else. The saleswoman had said that the promotion lasted only 1 day. The quality was excellent, and the manufacturer was selling it so cheaply today just to get people to know about their product. Ashley couldn't resist and bought it. The savings were quite timely. "Oh, are you offering to help carry my purchase?" "No, thank you. It's not heavy at all. I'm used to it," Ashley wasn't good at flirting, and she didn't want to start a conversation right now. The wound inflicted by Andrew had not yet healed. Pretty girls shouldn't carry heavy things. The thin man, older than her by about 20 years, was clearly interested in her. This happened often. The naive, simple dress that Rachel disliked so much and Ashley's long hair styled in a simple way attracted men like a magnet. Of course, it helped that Ashley had a shapely figure and long legs. She also exuded a sense of naturalness, hardly using any makeup. But she was no gold digger and had no intention of attaching herself to just anyone to avoid working. If Ashley were to tie her life to someone, it would only be a kind, reliable man. And she would definitely observe her chosen one for a long time beforehand, as she simply couldn't endure another tragedy in her personal life. "I won't have to carry anything. My husband is picking me up," Ashley lied. The man sighed in disappointment and disappeared into the crowd. Ashley sank into her memories. Walking made it easier to think. Her parents were fully preparing for the wedding. Everyone in the village said she was lucky. Andrew was a handsome, stately young man from a respectable family. He was well put together, and they had loved each other since high school. "You're so lucky, Ashley, you found your love right away. Look, I've chosen a gorgeous dress for you. It looks much more expensive than its price. Of course, it's a bit big, but I'll quickly adjust it," her mother said, admiring her daughter as she pinned the dress, eager to have it ready for the wedding in a week. "I've arranged for the catering in the cafeteria. They'll decorate it to the highest standard. Even though your Andrew is from a wealthier family than ours, let them see that we're not poor either. It will be magnificent. Almost 1,000 roses will be delivered from the flower farm. The smell will be absolutely amazing." Her father was a good man. He helped everyone. A good carpenter was an important person in the village, so people were always willing to accommodate him. "Mom, Dad, why did you have to spend so much?" "Let the groom do something too," Ashley said shyly. "Well, he gave you that expensive ring before he went to the army. Plus, you'll be living in the house that his parents set up for him. You'll have your own separate place. What more do you need?" "No, we simply had to contribute," her mother insisted. The ring that Andrew gave her before the wedding became the envy of all the girls and women in the village. It was gold, with a sapphire that had been passed down to Andrew from his great-grandmother. It was rumored that her family had once been merchants. But they had managed to save nothing except for the ring. So now it was passed down to the first son, who would then give it to the woman he chose to marry. It was obvious to everyone that Andrew wouldn't be careless with such valuables. If he gave it to Ashley, it meant he had already made his decision. There was no doubt about it. No one doubted that the young couple would soon have children. The neighbors approved of Andrew's choice. She was modest, hardworking, healthy, and pretty. She didn't have a big ego, and her parents were respectable. Yes, they weren't a wealthy family, but Andrew's father and mother were doing just fine. His dad ran a farm with a friend, so a rich bride wasn't particularly necessary for such a groom. However, what the village didn't know was that Andrew's father disapproved of his son's choice. Charles dreamed that Andrew would marry Alice, the daughter of his farm partner, who owned a large part of it. "You should think about it, Andrew. Alice has been in love with you for a long time. Sure, she's not as pretty as Ashley, but she's not ugly either. Plus, I would have a connection with her dad. We'd live even better." The father started to pressure his son. "Dad, what are you talking about? I've loved Ashley for a long time. I even gave her a ring. Her parents are preparing for the wedding in full swing. Are you trying to make me look like a scoundrel?" Andrew was initially surprised. "Son, just tell him that we are on the verge of bankruptcy." "He's not a child, he'll understand," his mother interjected. That's when the parents revealed the whole truth. It turned out that the animals on the farm had fallen ill, but only Charles's animals. The senior partner had given him a loan, but on rather harsh terms, and there was no way to pay it back. George suggested that if things go well with Alice, he would forgive the loan, the father explained. "Well, then we should sell the house you gave me," Andrew didn't want to betray Ashley. But where will we live? We've already mortgaged everything. Do you want to throw us out into the streets? His mother wailed. Andrew didn't know what to do. He decided to talk to Ashley privately. It seemed that he would have to marry Alice. He couldn't let his parents down. Please forgive me, Ashley. Keep the ring, since it's all my fault. I've already come up with a reason. I'll say that I accidentally got involved with Alice and she got pregnant. Andrew was afraid to look her in the eyes. But there was no other choice. His father was seriously overdue on the loan. They would not only lose everything, but his father could also end up in prison. And he had 3 younger brothers. Ashley was silent. She just covered her face with her hands, and her shoulders shook with silent sobs. Andrew tried to embrace her, to comfort her, saying that she would find her destiny. He even offered her money along with the ring. Suddenly, Ashley stopped crying. She looked at him with strange eyes filled with pain and despair. Then she took off the ring, put it on his pinky finger, it wouldn't fit on any other, and said, "Listen, Andrew, you're a traitor. I hate you, never, you hear, never again." She couldn't finish her sentence because she began to shake again. As the guy was leaving, he heard Ashley's loud cries and her mother's voice trying to calm her down. A couple of minutes later, the father of the jilted bride rushed onto the porch and shouted, "Who the hell is so brave? Come out, you scoundrel. I'll wipe that smirk off your face, and you'll remember it for a long time." The guy could certainly stand up for himself, but it would be cowardly to fight Ashley's father. He was the one at fault for everything. So he deemed it best to hide. He later wrote all this in a letter to Ashley. His younger brother slipped it into her hand when she boarded the very first evening train and left for the city to escape the shame. She only left a new phone number for her parents. It was terrifying to imagine how hard it must be for them right now. Surely everyone who felt like it was pestering them with questions. From her mother, she learned that Andrew wanted to compensate them for the wedding expenses, but her father wouldn't even let him on the doorstep. "Please forgive me, darling. We couldn't give you much money to take with you. You know how much we spent on the wedding," her mother apologized. "Oh, come on, Mom. They pay huge money here in the city. I'm living like a king," Ashley lied. "Well, maybe it's for the best that the scoundrel left you. You'll find a decent man," her mother sighed. "Yes, I really like it here. It feels like I was born here," Ashley was openly lying. Everything here felt foreign, expensive, and frightening. The only exception was her landlady and her son. They were pleasant people. But she wouldn't upset her parents, who had already borne the brunt of the gossip. It was terrifying to imagine how hard it was for them now. "Well, I'll tell your father. He'll be happy. You hold on there, and if anything goes wrong, come back, Ashley. To hell with that loser fiancé. We won't let anyone hurt you," said her mother. "Mom, I still want to try to settle down here. Maybe it'll work out. I just can't bear to see his face right now, you understand?" Ashley sobbed, unable to pretend she wasn't suffering any longer. "Oh, how can you not understand? Just remember, we're always on your side." Ashley was lucky with her parents. They always supported her. If they were in a situation like Andrew's father, they would never have acted that way. So, in a way, she had been fortunate in life. But she couldn't share all this with some Rachel, who, in an arrogant tone, asked what reasons there were for Ashley abruptly quitting her last job and running away. Someone like that would hardly understand anything. She would just judge her even more. Well, fine. Andrew chose a farmer's daughter. Let him live with her. Ashley would make her way for the sake of her parents and herself, living better than before. She would definitely have the best husband and wonderful, lovely children. She just had to work hard and wait. For some reason, she recalled Mr. Hansen's kind gaze. No, she wasn't some silly dreamer wanting to marry the company director. But anything could happen in life. Besides, no one forbids dreaming. After all, Ashley didn't plan on throwing herself at him. She wasn't some flirt. Her sense of honor was not just empty words. Ashley didn't even notice how she found herself in front of the familiar 5-story building where she had managed to find a room. She opened the door with her key. Miss Hazel was cooking something in the kitchen. "Ashley, you're back already? Why don't you have lunch with us, and bring Thomas too?" "Hazel, I didn't move in just to eat you out of house and home. I still haven't finished paying you for this month. But there is good news. I managed to find a job," Ashley beamed. She set the bottle of oil and some simple groceries she could afford on the kitchen counter. At least she could do something for her hospitable hosts. "Ashley, really? I can see you're a decent person. You won't leave us in debt. So stop fooling around. Call Thomas, and let's have lunch," the landlady insisted. The elderly woman was one of those people who tried to help others even in difficult situations. Another person wouldn't have cared about her circumstances. If she couldn't pay the full rent, they would have kicked her out with her belongings. But Ashley was fortunate here. She was glad that she had managed to endure the insults at the interview. Now she could repay Hazel and her son with kindness. In 10 minutes, the three of them were having a peaceful lunch, as if they had known each other for 1,000 years. Ashley stole glances at the wheelchair. It was a shame that life had been so harsh on Thomas. He was a great guy, handy, good-looking, with thick, wavy brown hair that must have driven women wild before. Broad-shouldered, athletic, with intelligent brown eyes, hard-working, well-mannered, and even kind, perhaps too kind. Thomas's mother told her that when her son faced a difficult choice 2 years ago to save himself or the passengers of the car that skidded into oncoming traffic on icy roads, he didn't hesitate to steer his vehicle onto the shoulder. That's where he flipped over. He was fortunate that the car didn't explode and that everyone who was supposed to die survived, young parents with a small child. Thomas never regretted his decision back then. He said the worst thing was to cause harm to another person knowingly when you fully understand that there is another choice. He preferred to live with a clear conscience. However, this life was not easy for him at all. He fought for 1.5 years. Doctors feared he wouldn't be able to move his arms, and he also had a dangerous concussion. So even the fact that he couldn't walk was considered a blessing. Such was the price to pay. "I wouldn't take any money from you at all, dear. It's just that my son needs surgery." "There's still a chance that Thomas will start walking," Hazel told Ashley when they first met. "But I'm just a stranger to you. How can you not take money?" That seemed strange. The girl was surprised. "Oh, I'm sure Thomas would be happy about that," the landlady smiled for some reason. Ashley wondered why she said that and soon noticed that Thomas liked her. That was what his mother was hinting at. He constantly tried to help in any way he could. He asked a friend to pick up the old couch from her room, which was barely hanging on, and after fixing it, he kept it for himself. Ashley gave him her good bed with an orthopedic mattress. Hazel didn't object. She understood that although her son probably had little chance of marrying a young, healthy woman, it was still beneficial for him that Ashley had moved in with them. Thomas had changed. He started smiling and joking again. If he had previously refused the surgery, now he dreamed of undergoing treatment himself. Hazel was very happy about this. She would give anything for a chance for Thomas to walk again, even if it was with difficulty or with a cane. It wasn't even about fearing she would have to support her son for the rest of her life. It was just that her health wasn't very good. She worried a lot about not being able to get her son on his feet if something happened to her. Her heart wasn't functioning well. "Thomas, that grumpy woman gave me an interview. What a disaster." She glared at me with wide eyes. She was like an investigator. Why did I leave the village? How dare I dress unfashionably? I thought for sure I wouldn't get hired. But lo and behold, they offered me a high position as a cleaner, Ashley cheerfully recounted during lunch. Thomas smiled, as always. He always brightened up when he saw Ashley. Hazel nodded along happily, thinking how lucky she was to have this tenant. She was like a burst of optimism and cheerfulness. Hazel herself had come from a village in her youth, fell in love with a city man, and Thomas's father died on a construction site. But she didn't regret anything. Love isn't just about the sweet stuff, but what can you do? She raised her son as best as she could. But she couldn't protect him. Though what could she have done? Thomas was happy when he worked as a driver at the bakery. A good boy. He was content with a modest, honest life. And now he couldn't seem to find himself. Thomas, you have golden hands. Have you thought about making something at home? Look how skillfully you fixed the couch, and you even made the wardrobe yourself. Not everyone can do that. It's truly a sight to behold, better than store-bought, she heard Ashley's voice. Hazel's heart filled with joy. What a good girl. She was supporting her son. But of course, Thomas had no prospects. Once Ashley got back on her feet, she would flutter away. With her looks and practicality, finding a fiancé wouldn't be a problem. And that fool who left her would surely be biting his elbows. Some idiots don't understand in their youth that finding the right person is a huge problem. A wife is a friend, a partner, a mother to the children, and a beloved one. You can't just pick any pretty face and live with her. You're not getting a cat. But no, many don't understand this. And then they complain that they've had an enemy by their side all this time. That the wife betrayed them at the worst moment and that their children don't respect their father. Andrew would definitely regret it. Hazel dreamed that the surgery would help her son after all. Then this young woman could very well become her daughter-in-law. Oh, how good that would be. She would be at peace about her son. Maybe she would even get to see grandchildren. That would be nice. But it was better not to hope too much. That way, she wouldn't have to cry bitterly. These were Hazel's thoughts. In the meantime, they had finished lunch. Ashley deftly cleared the table, washed the dishes, and wiped everything down with a towel. All the while, she continued to chirp cheerfully. Thomas watched her like he was mesmerized. He followed every movement. It was obvious that he had fallen head over heels in love. This was the first time his mother had seen him like this. She felt both happy and anxious. Love is a serious thing. It can heal, but it can also wound. This feeling would bring something to Thomas. This was yet another thing a mother couldn't control, her child's heart. At that very moment, Ashley finally got to work. She didn't even consider cleaning much of a job. She managed quickly, even though the office wasn't small at all. There were many visitors. Oh, you clean so skillfully and quickly, it's a real sight to behold. We should probably pay you extra for making our office look so good, Mr. Hanson praised Ashley. However, he had no intention of giving her a raise. Compliments were one thing, but parting with even a little money felt sad and unpleasant. The boss knew he was a handsome man and made a lasting impression on both young girls and respectable ladies. But this naive village girl had truly fallen for him, and it flattered Howard's ego. He deliberately fueled her interest in him even more, but carefully, so that no one would later say that the boss seduced the cleaner. But if anything did happen, he wanted it to look as if she had thrown herself at him and that he simply couldn't resist. Oh, you're overpraising me, Mr. Hanson. I'm not doing anything special, I'm just doing my job. We had much more to do back in my village. The naive young girl didn't know how to inflate her own worth, which couldn't help but please the boss. Another person might have said, more brazenly, then pay me extra for doing such a good job, instead of just talking. But Ashley was so sweet and selfless that it made his heart rejoice. I'm not overpraising you at all. Clients say my office shines like a luxury car. All the time. I'm afraid someone might poach you, Mr. Hanson winked at the cleaner as if joking. Ashley blushed fiercely. The boss, of course, knew that his actions were fueling her infatuation, but it meant nothing to him. He was just amusing himself casually. He tried to spread his charm to all the ladies. Firstly, before dropping the news that he wasn't hiring full-time staff and wouldn't pay more, he could flirt a little, as they say. And secondly, if things went really badly, a fake wife might be needed. He could offload all his problems onto her. So, it was necessary to cultivate the ladies for such a serious businessman in advance. Without even realizing it, all the women in the office were undergoing an invisible casting for two vacant roles, that of a temporary free entertainment or a fake wife. The casting was strict. Howard categorically dismissed cynical women who aimed to squeeze money from him and the like. As they say, if a lady knows her worth, she has likely stated it more than once. Such women were of no use to him. But Ashley, living by the call of her heart, fit both roles perfectly. If things continued like this, all it would take was a little gesture from him. Hint at starting a family, display some deeply hidden feelings, and she would run headlong into any trap. It's good that there are still decent girls around, this thought warmed Howard. He felt like a predator in a forest full of rabbits, while foxes, she-wolves, and especially lionesses and tigresses were completely unnecessary to him. It lowered his self-esteem when he was used. At the very least, it stripped relationships of that intimate aura when you feel powerful, terrible, the smartest, and the cunningest while pulling the strings of a victim who thinks at that moment that you are simply courting her. Hey, Ashley, don't let your mouth hang open. Our boss has flirted with many, but when it went further, he fired them all. This doesn't apply to me, of course, but I feel sorry for you. I hope you're not that foolish cleaner dreaming of the director's love, Rachel mocked her. Now she was her direct supervisor. And Ashley had to endure her supposedly witty remarks regularly. Rachel, do you have any complaints about my work? Ashley realized she needed to respond as succinctly as possible. That way, they would harass her less. She was gradually adapting to city life. What? Are you implying that I'm meddling in your business? What a rude girl. You're already dreaming of being the boss's wife. Have you even named your future children yet? What a pitiful thing. Rachel laughed maniacally. In fact, Rachel couldn't even explain why she hated Ashley so much. The girl was just too strange. Poor people had no right to pride. Was it really that hard to understand? But no, Ashley had fancied something about herself. Well, fine. When she fell into Mr. Hanson's trap, she could only blame herself. Rachel felt conflicted emotions. On one hand, she couldn't stand that brazen girl who dared to talk to her as if they were equals. On the other hand, she knew the boss well and saw that this situation wouldn't end well for Ashley. She was like a rabbit, thinking the wolf was chasing her because it wanted to be friends. She had no understanding of life. If only she would listen to Rachel and think before it was too late. Well, let her do what she wants. Rachel decided she wouldn't give her any more advice. About a month passed. Ashley tried to ignore the hints from the arrogant city ladies. She understood perfectly well that there was no chance of building a relationship with Mr. Hanson. And the fact that she liked him wasn't a crime. It was just a platonic feeling. Everyone has the right to dream. Ashley just needed to switch her thoughts to someone else so she wouldn't keep remembering Andrew. Her mother said on the phone that they weren't doing too well with Alice. She seemed to be drinking, scolding him, and blaming him for spending his father's money. Ashley could have taken some pleasure in that, but she didn't feel like it. She asked her mother never to tell her anything more about that fiancé. She hoped to save money, get an education, and find a good job. Maybe she would take out a loan for a place in another village or even move her parents to the city. Of course, all this would take time. But she was young, ready to work hard, and nothing ever comes easy to someone like Ashley. It was a mistake for the women at work to consider her so foolish. In this life, Ashley relied only on herself. She was nearing her house when she suddenly heard a strange sound coming from the direction of the trash bin. She approached closer and noticed a puppy sitting in a box. "Why aren't you running away?" Ashley was surprised. She picked him up, and when she felt one of his little legs, the puppy howled desperately. "Oh, it seems like something's broken. You can't stay here." The puppy was clearly a domestic one. Apparently, someone just got tired of him and threw him away as no longer needed. Andrew had done the same to her. So, at her own risk, Ashley carried the little Fluff home. Oh, what a good boy. You know what? Don't tell Mom that you found him. I'll say I asked a friend to find me a dog. Then there won't be any problems, Thomas suggested. Well, lying doesn't seem right, Ashley hesitated. But she thought that Hazel probably wouldn't mind a dog too much if her son wanted one. Let's name her Tomley, in honor of you and me. It turned out the puppy was a girl. Ashley agreed. It was a great name. She was glad that Tomley had found a home. Maybe things would work out for her someday too. To be honest, Hazel wasn't particularly fond of dogs. But seeing how much her son adored the little red pup with a white mark on her chest, she was at least happy that the dog was small and not aggressive. Yes, it'll mean more responsibilities. A dog is a commitment for about 15 years. Who's going to take her for walks? The elderly woman sighed. Mom, I'll try to take her for walks more often, and Ashley promised to help. Besides, don't you believe that one day I'll be on my feet? Thomas asked. The boy was excited about the idea of getting better because he really wanted to start courting Ashley. Of course I believe you, but it will take some time, Hazel said, tearing up. It didn't take long for her to grow fond of Tomley herself. Now she often went for walks with her son and the dog. Ashley was happy that Thomas had a light in his window. She had no idea that the real reason for his love for the dog was that the boy was in love with her and intended to marry her. That was why he had reacted so enthusiastically to the puppy. It was something personal between the two of them. Thomas imagined how their children would play with Tomley, and their parents would say that the dog had come long before the wedding. At the same time, Ashley was also lost in dreams. She started watching romantic comedies more often, especially those where the main character resembled Mr. Hanson, even just a little. She also enjoyed movies where the heroine reminded her of herself in some way. With bated breath, she followed the ups and downs of the lovers' fates. She eagerly caught every kiss on screen and sometimes allowed herself to entertain a faint thought that she might have a chance at something like that too. Ashley, how can you watch those silly movies? They're so boring, Thomas told her. Why not? She was surprised. Well, it's just that life doesn't work that way. They don't match each other at all. I believe people should come from roughly the same social background. What can a rich guy possibly talk about with a waitress or a cleaner? The boy explained. Well, maybe you're right, but still. These movies lift my spirits, Ashley replied. She didn't want to come down from the clouds to reality. The wound from her breakup with Andrew was just beginning to heal, so it was essential for her to live in some dazzling fantasy. Besides, she was very worried about her boss. He hadn't been at work for several weeks. There were rumors that Mr. Hanson had been hospitalized. Ashley continued to clean his office to a shine, even though it was already clean. She felt that this way, she was helping Mr. Hanson recover faster. If she could help him in any way, she would gladly do it. I could visit Mr. Hanson, she said to the secretary casually. The secretary had been hired recently, and the blonde, phlegmatic girl didn't care at all who did what, as long as she wasn't forced to work and make unnecessary movements. Well, go ahead, Barbara provided Ashley with all the necessary information about her boss's whereabouts and added, "Oh, let's hope neither of us gets fired." Why do you think that could happen? Ashley was surprised. Not that Barbara had become her friend, but unlike the others, she didn't act rudely or look down on her. So they sometimes chatted openly. Mr. Hanson got sick right after it was revealed that the main owner of the business, Patrick Ward, was coming for a checkup, Barbara whispered. Wait, so the boss doesn't run the company? Ashley was surprised. Of course not. He's just the manager of this branch. A pawn. Almost like us, just hired employees. And I don't think he's really sick. He probably messed up and is afraid of the inspection, Barbara replied. She didn't tell Ashley that she had overheard a conversation between Rachel and Mr. Hanson. Those two clearly had something to hide. It seemed the debits and credits weren't adding up, and Rachel was pleading not to be left alone with the problems. Her voice had sounded quite frightened. "Listen, Barbara, even if Mr. Hanson made a mistake, he definitely didn't do it on purpose. I'm sure there won't be any problems. He's an honest, open person," Ashley said confidently. "Oh, I wouldn't be so sure about that. You've worked for so many months, and they haven't raised your salary or hired you full-time. And it seems this happens to almost everyone. You can't really call someone decent who allows himself to behave like that," Barbara said. She was already looking for a new job and decided to warn Ashley, who had impressed her with her integrity and cheerfulness. "Listen, maybe the boss isn't in the mood for us right now. If anyone's stirring the pot, it's Rachel. I'm sure Mr. Hanson will recover and fulfill all his promises. Right now, he's sick, and it's just cruel to remind him of such trivial matters," Ashley exclaimed. Barbara just shrugged. She thought that if Ashley wanted to keep wearing rose-colored glasses, who was going to stop her? Nothing. Sooner or later, everyone gets over the idealization of bosses and people in general. Ashley went to the hospital the very next day. The attendant didn't bother to escort her, just pointed down one of the long corridors. She didn't quite understand where to go, so she decided to catch up with the orderlies who were moving quickly ahead. "Hey, are you assigned to that Howard?" asked a sturdy blond man of the bald, heavy-set guy. He doesn't seem to be very sick, from what I can see. But he's paying for the room." "The rest isn't my business," replied the other. "Yeah, they said the diagnosis was serious," the first one said in surprise. "Seriously? If it were true, he wouldn't be messing around with alcohol. Believe me, he'd have been twisted up by now." Excuse me, which room is Howard Hanson in?" Ashley decided to interrupt this dialogue. "Gary, show the lady the way. It's your turn," the blonde said to the bald man. And Ashley realized they had just been talking about her boss. They're probably gossiping. They talk about all sorts of things about me at work too. But there's no truth in it, Ashley thought. When she entered the room, she was even more convinced that the orderlies were, to put it mildly, exaggerating. The boss looked pale, focused, and struggled to speak. "Ashley, it's so good that you came. I'm afraid I don't have much time left. And I'm glad that in the end, I'll see a pleasant, decent person before me. Do I at least appeal to you a little? You've always been so extraordinarily kind to me." Mr. Hanson dramatically sank into the pillows after delivering this speech. If Ashley had been more cynical, she would have detected the false notes. But instead, she became emotionally involved in the situation. Tears welled up in her eyes. Ashley couldn't imagine that such a sweet man, the one she secretly loved, was about to die. "Mr. Hanson, of course, I like you, and everyone loves you. How could it be otherwise?" she exclaimed. The director raised one eyebrow, like a bold romantic hero in one of those TV series, and said breathlessly, "Ashley, I'm not liked by everyone. There are many conspiracies and scoundrels around me. I need a trustworthy person by my side. I've been keeping an eye on you for a while. Unfortunately, I don't have time for courtship, but I ask you to be my wife. Let's get married this week, and I'll arrange everything," he stunned the young woman. Ashley paled. How could this be? Had he been in love with her all this time too? Or did he really just need a reliable person beside him? But she couldn't even dream of such a thing. Ashley pinched herself on the wrist with her right hand to make sure this wasn't a dream. "But, Mr. Hanson, believe me, you're not going to die. I understand that you're feeling bad right now, and all sorts of thoughts are running through your head." She couldn't believe she was actually trying to talk him out of it. "Ashley, believe me, I'm an adult man, and I know perfectly well what I'm doing and why. If you don't like me at all, refuse. I won't ask again." "I still have some pride left." Mr. Hanson dramatically covered his eyes with his hand, as if he were in extraordinary pain. A simpleton like Ashley was supposed to find that appealing. "Can I think about it for a day?" she mumbled. Sure, of course, but it would be a shame if you didn't find me tomorrow. But I'll try to wait for you. Mr. Hanson really tried not to laugh. This silly girl was looking at him with such touching eyes. She was truly charming in her foolishness. It was fun to play cat and mouse with her. When Ashley ran out of the room, he heard her sobbing. Well, she was caught. She wouldn't escape his net now. Howard pulled out a flask and took another swig for courage. Everything was falling into place wonderfully. He would escape with the money he had been diligently stealing, leaving a little for Rachel to cover for him temporarily and to get through her firing peacefully. Meanwhile, the pursuers would be looking for a man with a completely different last name. He would take on the silly and simple last name of his newly minted wife for a while. No one would find him. And by the time they figured something out, Howard would be very far away. They would start shaking Ashley down, but the poor girl was used to suffering, so she would just understand that naivety comes at a high price. She would find a way to get by. There was nothing to take from her, and perhaps next time she would be smarter. Ashley, let's go for a walk with Tomley. You seem really happy today, Thomas asked. Just wait, I'll tell you everything right now. When they got down to the waterfront, Ashley excitedly recounted everything that had happened in the hospital. Can you imagine, Thomas? The man you're madly in love with suddenly offers to spend the rest of his life with you, and you never even hoped for it. I feel like I'm on cloud 9, like I've grown wings. I can imagine. That's really great. Thomas was relieved he hadn't confessed his feelings as he had planned to do not long ago. Still, he felt very unwell, struggling to breathe. He didn't want Ashley to see his suffering, so he discreetly dialed himself from a second phone. Oh, it's Paul calling. It seems he's found a job for me. Would you mind picking up Tomley? I'll wait for him here, and then we can talk. Of course. I know how important it is for you to find a job. I'm sure everything will turn out wonderfully for both of us, Ashley said, skipping away. Well, unfortunately, it won't for me. He covered his face with his hands. The water glistened enticingly. He only needed to release the brakes of the wheelchair. There was no one around. It was dark. He would relieve his mother of constant worries, and he wouldn't have to suffer anymore. And Ashley would be fine. She would be safe behind that dandy, her boss. And Tomley would be loved by her mother. She wouldn't throw him away. Everything would be fine for everyone. Except for him. Jealousy tore at him from the inside. His hand released the brake on its own, and before he could even think, the wheelchair was racing toward the dark water at a wild speed. Then he heard a splash, and it became very cold. He couldn't breathe. Thomas was almost submerged in the water and, feeling a sense of relief, thought that the straps wouldn't come undone anyway, so it would look like an accident. Suddenly, strong hands grabbed him from both sides. Dude, what are you doing? A neighbor and his friend appeared nearby. Okay, don't touch him, John. We haven't been in his shoes, said the second one. Just don't tell my mother. Thomas realized they had seen everything. They knew this wasn't an accident. Who do you take us for? We're not going to upset an elderly woman, John said. You should be ashamed. What did your mother give birth to you for? To endure such disgrace? Asked the neighbor, Nicholas. Exactly. Would you want your child to do something like this? None of us have an easy life, you know, but we somehow hold on, John said. Thomas felt very ashamed. It was surprising that it was these two who saved him. John had recently lost a child, which he and his wife had sent on an expensive trip with their last money. They even took out a loan. The little one had begged for it so much. But it ended badly. He drowned while playing in the pool. It all happened so stupidly, they hadn't managed to save him. As for Nicholas, he had served in the military and returned with a limp and shrapnel wounds. Few wanted to hire him. His wife left him. He mostly lived on a meager government allowance. These guys' lives were truly not much better than his, if not worse. You're right, guys. I'm sorry for the trouble. And thank you. "If you need anything, just let me know," he said quietly. Fortunately, it started to rain at that moment, so he could explain why he was soaked. The flash of jealousy had passed. Only hopelessness remained. He would live alone for the rest of his life. He would be in a wheelchair, getting in everyone's way. What a fate. Nicholas and John helped him get home. He was glad that his mother and Ashley were watching TV together. They only called from the room to ask if everything was okay. He responded in the most cheerful voice he could muster that yes, everything was fine. Only Tomley whimpered pitifully and looked at him with silent reproach, as if she knew everything and was judging him. "I'm sorry, my good girl, something got stuck." He could only respond to her and quickly made his way to his room. He needed to be alone, to come to terms with the thought that there would never be love in his life. He couldn't let it show. The next day, Ashley rushed to the clinic at dawn and accepted Howard's proposal. He was very pleased and lamented that he couldn't give her a ring just yet. He promised that as soon as he was on his feet, he would buy one immediately. "It's fine, I already had a ring, but it didn't bring me happiness." Ashley involuntarily thought of Andrew. But it didn't hurt anymore. Her new happiness overshadowed her old sorrows. Howard immediately gave the order to start preparing for the wedding as quickly as possible. He gave Ashley some money for her wedding outfit and asked her to keep everything a secret for now. While he was in the hospital, Patrick wouldn't conduct an inspection. So, he needed to continue pretending to be sick. No one should suspect that Howard was scamming them. "Mr. Hanson, I don't quite understand the test results. They seem contradictory." "Let's do another examination," suggested his attending physician, who had started to suspect something. "Daniel, let's postpone it. I'm barely managing to pretend in front of my fiancée that I'm feeling well, and I simply don't have the strength for tests. And what will happen to the poor girl if I don't marry her?" "She's waiting for twins from me," Howard lied. The doctor grew wary. He had heard the so-called fiancée talking on the phone with her mother. She said that for now, her relationship with the fiancé was platonic, but he really needed her support. Apparently, her mother was discouraging her from a hasty marriage. Of course, women often lie, but why would she pretend in front of her own mother? No, she didn't seem like the mistress of this trickster. He was up to something. The test results showed clear discrepancies. Moreover, they had been conducted by a doctor known for being willing to do anything for money. Daniel decided that he should install a hidden camera in the room. He wanted to learn more about the patient. He didn't even understand why he was getting involved in this. Maybe he liked Ashley, or he really didn't like people like this slick character, or perhaps both were true. And Daniel definitely wouldn't let anyone make a fool of him, someone who could be easily led around. The very next day, the camera recorded an interesting conversation. "Rachel, what's our accountant saying? Are we trading stocks? Have they dropped?" She apparently replied that everything was as he thought. Because Howard was pleased that he could cover part of his dealings when prices soared again. Right now, he ordered them to quickly buy up the plummeting stocks of their company. "They won't catch us. I'll change my last name. I'll marry this dimwit, the cleaner. Don't worry, she won't understand a thing. She'll be so happy. Just make sure you don't slip up, or you won't get anything. And I don't care that Patrick is furious. Just tell him I'm very sick. You can't pick apart the test results. Let him check if he wants." "Well, now you're in my pocket, my dear." Daniel was glad he had pretended not to know Patrick Ward in time. After all, it was Patrick who had invited him from another hospital as a supervising physician. But everything was arranged as if Daniel had simply come to work here because he had long intended to. Even the medical staff thought so. Therefore, no one could inform Howard that a watcher had been sent to him. The very next day, Daniel heard Howard being exposed with a loud bang. "So, who betrayed me?" Howard asked indignantly. "Is that all you're worried about? You'd better think about how to compensate for the losses. It wasn't in Patrick's interest to expose his doctor. He called Ashley to find out how she had taken the news about her fiancé. He decided to support her. Everything is really bad, Daniel. Rachel fired me. She thinks I somehow pretended to be an innocent lamb and revealed their affair with the boss. She says there's no one else. How am I going to pay for my room now? Listen, Ashley, I can help you with a job at the clinic. Of course, it pays no more than your previous job, but I'll recommend you. The doctor felt awkward that he couldn't confess to Howard that he had set him up. Daniel would have done so gladly, but he had to keep the word he had given. Besides, it would clearly be better for Ashley not to deal with that shady company. She was too naive. It was lucky that they considered her cunning. At least they would fear her and think she was under the founder's protection. Of course, I agree. When can I start? Ashley replied. She desperately needed a job. About 2 months passed. Ashley was doing excellently in her new duties. Many patients even requested to have Ashley assigned to them. They tried to poach her as a caregiver. But Ashley decided that it was better to have a stable, regularly paid job than to work for a capricious client who could refuse her services at any time. Daniel found himself thinking that he was increasingly fond of Ashley. He was glad that, thanks to his efforts as well, this lovely girl hadn't married that scoundrel fraudster. Sometimes he even began to consider marrying her himself. However, he wasn't entirely sure of his feelings, so he simply showed her unobtrusive attention. The thing was, he still had an unfinished romance with one of his former patients, who initially wanted to divorce her husband but then changed her mind. Daniel hadn't known about her husband when everything started to unfold. So he gave Brenda a year to sort things out. Because of this, he didn't allow himself to complicate things for Ashley. She had already been through so much. Still, he tried to help her. So when Ashley said she needed to work more to help her landlord pay for her son's surgery, he suggested, "Listen, there's no need for any money here. There's a clinic that helps people like Thomas for free. However, you need to go through a preliminary interview so they can determine if there's a chance to help." Really? You know, you're just bringing me luck. If this works out, I'll be so happy. Those people took me in during the toughest time in my life. They've become like family to me. Can you imagine? We even have a dog together, Ashley exclaimed with joy. Daniel didn't particularly enjoy hearing her raves about the wonderful Thomas. But he decided to let things be. He helped organize the examination and even gave recommendations since he had personally examined Thomas to expedite the process. "Hazel, we have the approval. Your son will fly on a plane. An urgent flight has been arranged," Ashley delightedly informed the landlady. "Oh, I don't know how to thank you. We'll never be able to repay you," Thomas's mother said, touched. She definitely wanted to fly with her son. But at the last moment, her blood pressure let her down and started to fluctuate. Thomas convinced her to wait for him at home. "Let me fly with Thomas." "You'll see, we'll manage," Ashley said. She had already asked for time off from work for this occasion. They had flown almost half the way when suddenly a storm hit. The plane began to toss from side to side. Thomas took Ashley's hand and said, "You know, if I could give my life for you, I would do it right now. It's all because of me. But I want you to know that I love you. Truly. For life." Ashley paled. She had never thought that Thomas felt so seriously about her. Of course, she suspected it. She could see that the young man was fond of her. But now it suddenly became clear that it was much more serious than that. He wanted to have much more in common with her than just a dog they had together. "Thomas, we're not going to die. You'll see, I know for sure. Of course, I'm a loser, but we will live long." She hugged Thomas around the shoulders. Ashley didn't know exactly how long they had been shaking in the airplane, listening to the frightened cries of the passengers and how several objects had flown towards her, but Thomas shielded her with his strong chest. So, for some reason, she felt calm. He knew that as long as he was protecting her, he couldn't allow himself to die. When they finally announced the landing, it felt as if they both awoke from a dream. It seemed that this danger had made them one, and they would never part again. "Thomas, you know, no matter how the surgery ends, let's get married," she whispered before he was taken to the operating room. "Wait, that's not fair. Why didn't you tell me this earlier?" He was already being taken away, yet he smiled like a child, waving his huge hand. Ashley understood that fate had finally found her. Right then, she was sure that he was not a fake or a traitor, but a true husband with whom they would definitely live long and, of course, happily. She no longer awaited the surgery results with such anxiety. She accepted her fate. She would be with Thomas, no matter what happened. "Everything's fine. He'll be able to walk," the doctor concluded. And Ashley was even surprised. What? Was it possible? Fate not only provided her with a husband, but also healed him? The doctor added that the patient was remarkably stable. Everyone felt that they had never seen such a resilient patient before. Thomas had fully mobilized all his life forces and even joked that everything healed on him faster than on a dog. For some reason, Hazel had decided against dying when she learned that her son was all right. Moreover, she took it upon herself to organize the young couple's wedding since they needed to find somewhere to spend the money that wasn't needed for the surgery. "Mom, is it really necessary to rush? Maybe Ashley wants to think it over a bit more?" Thomas felt a bit uncomfortable that he seemed to be forcing things. "Don't you understand? Back then, before the surgery, I had already made up my mind." Ashley whispered and pressed against his shoulder. And it was only then that Thomas realized that none of this was a dream. For the wedding, he invited John and Nicholas, the two who had saved him. Together, they agreed not to lose heart and to open a specialized workshop at one of their summer houses so that the world would bend to them rather than the other way around. Daniel attended the wedding with Brenda. She had finally divorced her husband. This happened, for some reason, on the very day that Thomas successfully had his surgery. So the doctor was glad to have found his happiness as well. Brenda was a complicated person, but he fell in love with her at first sight. That meant she was his destiny. Calm and cheerful Ashley was expecting a baby from another man. So there was nothing to regret. For the wedding, Daniel gifted the couple a free annual checkup from himself personally. This way, he could ensure that Thomas would indeed be okay from now on. "Ashley, you don't need to work anymore. You have a husband who brings home the bacon. The guys and I are making a good profit restoring things we find at the dump and then selling them to antique lovers. I might just become a wealthy man," Thomas said one day. "No, that's not necessary. Wealthy people don't seem to have much luck." "Stay the way I fell in love with you," his wife asked. Meanwhile, Hazel was knitting a pink bonnet and matching booties. She really liked Ashley's parents, who came to visit her. Together, they decided to name the first granddaughter Julia. After all, she was due to be born in July. Well, how else? They thought that this warm and friendly summer month would bring her nothing but happiness.